Based on your experience, what are the top 3 characteristics to have in order to be successful? For these type of people, what does success look like? What does it feel like? What are the characteristics that can get you there?
What success looks like and feels like is different for everyone because we all define success in a different way. So I leave that to them. But what does it take to succeed? That I can tell you because I could be an idiot at this point. But when you've been with 50 million people, 4 million in live seminars for days and nights and days and nights, I know that whatever we do, it's a result of our patterns. It's not us. There are certain patterns that'll make you angry, they'll make you frustrated, they'll make you pissed off. And there's certain patterns of thinking and feeling and using your body that'll make you playful and fun and grateful and excited and passionate. And if you think it's you, because you've done a pattern so long, it's hard to change yourself, but it's easy to change a pattern.
Where do the patterns come from?
We learn them through our conditioning. When you first were born, you can do anything in your life. You can, scream, yell, go to the bathroom in your pants. Try that when you're 30, see if it works, right? But you learn very quickly as time goes by, your love for nothing as a baby, right? Your love, no matter what you do, because your mother's, got oxytocin. She's natural drug in her body. Men get it too, but women get 10 times as much. That's why a healthy woman cannot leave her child. A healthy man can, but a woman can't. Right? She's biochemically healthy. And so you look at this and you say, what are the 3 things needed? I can tell you what they are. The number one, I love intelligence. I love wickedly intelligent people. I try to hire as many of them as possible, learn from them. But what's more valuable than intelligence is hunger. You find, if you look at what's the common denominator between Richard Branson, Mark Benioff, you give me your list of whoever it is, I guarantee if you dig underneath, their hunger has never gone away. Some people get hungry because they got a goal to, achieve something or get in a swimsuit by a certain date or some stuff. But that's not an identity change, right? These are people that are like myself. I'm hungry today at 57 more than I was at 26. I feel in me. And when I say hungry, I'm hungry to contribute, to learn, to grow, to make a difference. I'll never settle less than I can be or do or share or give or create. And everyone I know that's successful, that's the driving force. Because with that hunger, you can get the skill. With that hunger, you can figure it out. There are a lot of very smart people who can't fight their way out of a paper bag in a pragmatic way. And they got, great transcripts and shit like that. I went to Harvard one time and I spoke, and right before I spoke, they had voted at Harvard Business School to not release anyone's transcripts to the recruiters of the businesses coming in, to block it. And the argument was, your education is more than just your grades. And I went berserk. I got up there, first of all, they said, Tony, I expect to be, 1,000 people there, a couple thousand people there. And they said, no, Bill Gates was here, we have 300 people, it's gonna be much smaller. But we ended up with about 1,200 people, standing room only. And they gave me 30 minutes, and of course I went 3 hours. I did, no one left. But one of the first things I did, I said, what is this bullshit I'm reading? This was in the paper that day. I said, listen, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you've been disrespectful to each other. I said, if you're not willing to show your transcripts, I agree with you. Your career, who you are, is more than just your degree here. But you chose Harvard for a reason. And there are people here that have worked around the clock and gotten, 4.0, and you got yourself a 2.6, and you're going to block them because there's more of you than the 4.0. It's not going to work that way when you get in business. When you get in business, you guys who are doing this right now, you're going to be judged on one thing, results. And your grades are the results in this context. And if you think your grades are not it, then convince me as the interviewer that the grades are a part of it, but there's so much more you've done. If you can't do that, you're never going to make it. I said, you guys, anybody voted for that? Just count on a future that is full with pain. And the room was like, it was pretty intense, I guess. I thought it was pretty soft, personally. And then all of a sudden people stood up and they did a standing ovation, and people said, this is bullshit, because this is what happens sometimes in a democracy. Sometimes in a democracy, the lowest level standard is what becomes natural. We're seeing it right now on the political side. We're seeing people that, in Berkeley, the home of free speech, people throwing things, burning things, destroying things, who are supposed to be liberals who should be open for open speech. And then you see conservatives that are just as dumb, saying things that are inflaming people. It's not one side or the other, it's us as a society. We gotta shift it. We gotta go from demonization to saying, let's say it's a fight over guns. Very emotional fight. What's the problem? We demonize each side. Nobody in this room, whether you're pro-gun or against gun, whether you want gun regulation or not, there's nobody in this room that doesn't want their children or their friends or their family safe and protected. We just disagree. People disagree on how. And if we can start with what we agree on, we can actually make progress. But today, there's no progress because we now also augment this with social media, and we augment it with the regular media. And think about it. The media is not here to inform you. They're here to startle you. We all know if we say something inflaming, you're gonna talk about it, share it on social media, and they get a multiplied effect. It's all about advertising. So you have to really discern yourself today. You have to understand it's the Wild West, not only on the internet, but on television as well. And you have to decide, if you're an independent thinker, what is really right, and maybe be part of the solution instead of another person that attacks the right or the left, Donald Trump or whoever it is that you're attacking. There's lots of people that are easy to attack, but attacking doesn't change anything.
The one thing that I have learned to relate to all of my children is to dream. There is nothing bigger than your dream. Nothing is greater than your dream. Now, as we sit in this great educational institution, I am not saying that your education is not important, because it's tied to a lot of your dreams. But let me tell you something. There ain't nothing bigger than your dream. Because your dream will propel you to get the education. Don't you ever stop dreaming. Don't you ever stop imagining. And we're going to talk about them two things a lot. But don't you ever stop dreaming. Your Bible says a man without a dream or vision shall perish. That's in your Bible. It ain't just in the one I read. Nowhere in there does it say without an education you perish. But it says without a dream or vision you perish. So if what you're dreaming about requires an education, it is then your dream that propels you to get the education. But the dream is bigger than anything, man. See, if it was an education that caused you to be great or successful, I ain't here today, because I don't have one of them. But nobody could outdream me. Your dream is everything, man. It's the biggest part of your life. Look, man, it is that thing that God puts in you that don't let you sleep sometimes. It's your dream. It's that thing, that part of you, man, that wakes you up and stirs the very pit of your soul. I've always taught my children to dream. The secret, though, the secret to real success is if you tie your gift to the dream.
When you wake up in the morning, start going, wow, this tea is amazing. This coffee is sensational. I love the smell of the shower gel. I love the sheets. I love waking up. I had to make myself do this, and it completely changed my life. I wake up and go, I love my life. I love being here. My first coffee, go, I love this coffee. I love my sheets. I love everything. And that's not really true, but if you can make your mind be happy with little wins, every time you eat something, it's sensational. Make a phone call, go, this is great. I'm reading, I'm watching my favorite show. This is amazing. When you sit down at the end of the day to watch Netflix, go, this is amazing. This is wonderful. You're training your mind to celebrate tiny little things. And when you get big things, every day feels like Christmas.
One of the number one things I get asked is, like, what's that first step? How do I get started? I don't know anybody. I don't have money. Like, what do I do? How did you overcome that? Like, tactically?
Yeah, I mean, I think another good piece of advice is the side hustle. So I started the business plan for Somasource when I was working as a management consultant. And I started working on it at nights and weekends, and just really because I was bored with my consulting job and I wanted to do something more meaningful. I knew I wanted to build a social enterprise of some kind, and so I read every book I could. I read every case study I could get my hands on. I learned about Muhammad Yunus and the microfinance movement. He remains an inspiration to so many of us in the field. I went out and I watched speeches done by other social entrepreneurs, and in this learning put together this business plan and applied for competitions online. I just sent out the business plan there was a social business challenge in Amsterdam that I found on the internet, and I submitted the application, and lo and behold, they called me. I went to the semifinals and I got one of those big checks. I got 22,000 euros from that competition. And around that time, I thought, okay, I should quit my job and do this full time. The next funding we got was from another business plan competition. I didn't place first in either of them. And that was another $14,000. And I cobbled that together and made that stretch for over a year in building Somasource at the very beginning.
There's really two concepts that I think set you apart. You've got just how powerful negative thinking is and some of the stats around that, which are pretty terrifying, and some of the stories that you have on that, which are, I think, will really shake people out.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's neutral thinking. So I think that's sort of the next 1-2 that we should walk through.
Yeah, and then I think probably the third part of that would be sort of the impact of behavior, of identifying behavior. But what I learned ultimately, my dad was the president of the National Association for Self-Esteem. Most people probably don't even know there is that. And he was one of the first authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul. So for anybody that's probably above 35, they would know that. But the power of positive thinking never resonated with me. And when I was young and I was 18 years old, I'd drop out of college and I was diagnosed with an initial diagnosis of cancer, and it turned out to be shingles and a number of other things. I did start to understand quickly that, well, I don't know if positive thinking works all the time and that the data is anecdotal. I do know that negative thinking does work, and it works negatively. And one of the things is I would start at Alabama, and I would start with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I would start with the Miami Dolphins. I started to realize, and even looking back to a young age, that nobody wants to be told to be positive. That positive thinking is probably the number one reason this industry has not grown in my 44 years of living. Positive thinking in many cases repulses people. You're telling me to be positive and I'm going through a divorce. You're telling me to be positive and I threw 3 interceptions. You're telling me to be positive and I got to deal with this president. You're telling me to be positive and I got this current situation. You're telling me to be positive and I got this health situation.
Let's say someone has horrible lives, right? But let's say that there's a suitcase of $100,000 cash. If you just remember the name of the next stranger you meet, how many people are going to remember that person's name?
I'll remember.
Everyone, right? Everyone. And so that's the thing. The M stands for motivation. So it's interesting. So all of a sudden, everyone's a memory expert, but it had nothing to do with their capacity or their potential. Everyone could do it. It's just whether or not they decided to do it or not, if they wanted to.
It's almost like if it's worth it enough or the consequences are that big, or the stakes are that big, if you're going to miss out on not, right? It's the motivation.
Exactly. Because one of the things to learning, we know with human motivation, because I did this presentation and Bill Gates was there. And we're talking about wealthy individuals, right? And so, afterwards I talked to him and we were talking about the bridge between education and technology, and I was like, what's missing? What's the future of learning? And he was like, Jim, the key is human motivation, really understanding what drives people. And I was like, wow, that's really right. Because this, people can go out there and they can buy courses, but a lot of people
never open it.
Exactly, because it has everything to do with drive and reasons. Because motivation is like what is your motive for acting, right? What's the fuel? And I believe there's a success formula called H cubed, that it goes from your head to your heart to your hands. That people could visualize and affirm and see things here all the time and think about it. But if they're not acting with their hands, actually doing something about it, then usually what's missing is the second H, which is the heart, the emotion, the energy of motion. I had a martial arts instructor tell me years ago, you can't steer a parked car. You need fuel. Where's the energy that's going to do that? And so what's people's motive for action? So simple. When people are remembering people's name, ask yourself, why do you want to remember this person's name? Because reasons reap results. I've always found that in life. Wow. Reasons reap results, because you need a big enough why.
Sure.
Like Simon Sinek's book, start with why. And so you want to get that drive first.
So then what's the alternative? Well, the alternative has always been negative. So when we would get to the University of Alabama, you have this finite window of time. How long could you influence? Everything comes down to influence. Would you agree? Whether it's your family, your kids, whatever the circumstances, situations. So the NCAA gives you 22 hours to influence your players over a week. And so when you look at the human performance, you look at nutrition, you look at strength and conditioning, you look at fatigue science, you look at all these different things. Coach Saban believed that there had to be some emphasis on psychological education. And so how are we going to do that, and how is it going to be efficient? Well, most people think of sports psychology as treating somebody who has a problem. Nick Saban didn't look at it that way. He looked at, how do we make our best players better? How do we take great players and make them greater? And then how do we have an educational platform for all 120 players? And a college football team is a business. It's 120 employees, and you lose 35% of those employees every year. And it's an EBITDA-driven business where when you succeed, you get more sponsorship, and as you get more sponsorship, you make more money, and as you make more money, the school makes more money, and everybody benefits, and it all happens from winning. But if your best players leave every year in that 35% and they take their great behaviors and their great habits and their great mindset with them, then you're in trouble. So you have to develop programmatics. You have to develop a system. I mean, you look at Quest and what you guys did, that ultimately when you were going to sell it or you were going to evolve, that there had to be, if we're going to create the ultimate metabolic type of food, or we're going to limit, like, the recipe has to be the same, so you're not the only one that can cook it. So ultimately, psychologically, we had to come up with a plan for everybody. I think that learning how to meditate and regulate your breath is important, but to me, I think that's AP chemistry, and we need an 8th grade version where we just know, okay, that there's a table of elements, and we need the basics. And so that's what we did. When we started to study, what we learned was that negative thinking was the most powerful element that our players were combating. That negative thinking was weaponizing them against them. So how's negativity carried? Well, is it your internal thoughts? Well, if you're dealing with trying to change internal thoughts, then you got to go to affirmations, and you got to go to imagery, you got to go to visuals. Very difficult skills. But we started to look at the externalization. Well, if somebody says something out loud, it's 10 times more powerful than if they think it. And then as we started to study the data, particularly data that was just reinforced by Christine Porath from Georgetown and Harvard, that negativity is a multiple of 4 to 7 times more powerful than positivity. So think about that. If I say something out loud, it's 10x. If it's negative, it's 4 to 7 times more powerful. So when I say negative things out loud, it's 40 to 70 times more likely that that will happen or cause a result that won't be good for me than if I just didn't say anything.